Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Call It Revops, and today we're talking about something that I know a lot of teams are feeling and a lot of things that are impacting our current market, which is how do you maintain RevOps and drive growth with a shrinking budget? Obviously, with economic downturn, changes in customer preferences, all these things can impact your budget. So what can you do to keep driving growth and maintain that trajectory? And the first segment that we're really going to get into is survival strategies for RevOps. So when budgets tighten, what can we do to help RevOps grow and survive that budget shrinking while still delivering results?
And I think this is one of the points where we really want to, I really personally like to harp in on is because we have to do more with less. Like we talk about doing more with less. We are talk about how we're being asked to do more with less. But the idea is, and the conversation really is, your budget's gone at this point. We can justify it. We can try to get more budget. Those are all strategies you talked about now. But like, what do we do if we just don't have budget? And I think a couple takeaways we initially want to start with and kind of get right to the point on this is that we have to focus and identify things that are helping our collaboration across sales and marketing and success teams and items that are good to have. And when I say items, I really mean tech pieces of technology, what we're doing, the channels we're operating in. What makes a good RevOps leader, which is one of the podcasts that we did, is to be able to identify what is helping you, right? Like what is actually driving results, growth, and revenue, because we don't want to duplicate efforts and we don't want to misalign efforts across teams. And that's something that I think is very low. It's not a point of conversation and it's not a point of kind of thought up until the point your budget is gone, right? Like let's just take it for the fact your budget is gone. Now we have to get more leaner. You might be missing resources. Being asked to cut. Where can you cut? And the first point is let's align. And the purpose of alignment is looking at goals, looking at being transparent in your communications and saying, these are all the technologies that we're utilizing that are helping us. And that is the first kind of like starting point, right? Like, and when we dive a little bit more deeper into this, is that's just the first starting point. Second points that we really want to reference is like, what is the data showing? You know, Akane and I have talked a lot about how we don't leverage data or we use old data to justify. Actually, even in the last episode, we talked about that. But that's a very big impact, right? What is the data showing? What is it trending and what is it pointing to? I think those are the very key starting points of you get a notice, a memo. I don't know if people still send memos anymore, but hey, budget's cut, where do you go? What do you do? Those are the first points that we want to kind of highlight in like our survival strategy inside RevOps to make sure that we're still efficient in what we're doing.
Yeah, and to kind of, turn that into maybe a tangible example. When we think about technologies or processes, there's usually a lot of redundancies, especially when budgets get cut, especially if you have a ton of tech. Those redundancies get exposed really quickly because you have to fight for what tech you're going to keep. And if you're not focusing on those high impact activities based on what the data tells you, you could really get bit in the butt. And I think an example that we said is a RevOps team could essentially use predictive analytics, lean into that strategy, and find out what are the key accounts that a slimmer marketing team, a slimmer sales team with less MarTech stack enabled could actually go after key accounts, right? Instead of trying to get everything all the time, when you're put up against the wall, you have to get crafty and smart with it.
And then also let's talk about account-based marketing, right? Like let's talk about holistically revenue operation strategies that people use. Account-based marketing and account-based marketing software very specifically makes life easier. And the reason I'm talking about account-based marketing, there's plenty of software like that, right? But what is the concept behind the strategy is it's essentially making your life easier to look at key accounts and those key accounts that you want to target. Now, in realistically, we don't need to have a piece of software that tells us that, right? We know if we look at something very similar, what are the accounts that we're going after, right? What are the targets? What are the titles that we want to go after? We have that data in our database, right? And you can get to Connie's point very crafty with information that you have. Just remember, software and technology is there to make your life easier. ABM software, very particularly, consolidates all that information and it makes it easily digestible. But what if you don't have that budget to have that software? At the end result of it is still data that it's taking from your system and presenting it to you, and we can still get it. We can still run a report inside Salesforce, right? We can still run or your CRM, whatever it is. So just know, like when we talk about getting crafty, we kind of have to talk about what software is making our life easier, leveraging data and analytics that we already have, and how much of that can we just do ourselves?
Yeah, I was reminded of this example from this movie. It's about the BlackBerry founders and how they kind of came up with the idea. And the guy said, I forget his name, but the lead person said, "Give me a room with a telephone." And he had a telephone. He picked it up, closed a multi-million-dollar deal. If you get a great salesperson with Salesforce and CRM and automated outreach, Gong, all these different tools, they'll do great. But that same great salesperson, if they just have a phone, they're going to do great as well, right? We're just looking to enhance what is currently there with technology rather than adding technology to the mix when it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, and a lot of companies, no matter what the scale is, like, and once again, like a lot of our viewers are not, they might be in corporations where, realistically, they look at their marketing budget as throwing a bunch of thumbtacks in the air with all the new technology landscape, and wherever it lands, we're going to invest in, and that's awesome, right? So when we talk about cost cutting, when we talk about budgeting, in specifically, sometimes you kind of have to go back into that startup mode, right? Like when a startup is there, they don't have a lot, so we have to do more with less, right? Like the entire idea of startup is like we don't have a lot of money. How do we get scrappy? And in revenue operations, in a time of economic downturns or whatever the reason is, let's forget economic downturns, if budget conscious is an initiative for a company, go back to that startup mode, go back to that startup mentality, right? Like sometimes we just, but back in the college days, sometimes we just have to rely on good old trusty ramen, right? Like we
Yeah.
can't, we get so comfortable sometimes with what's available to us that we forget, like, hey, everyone had ramen. Like I used to
Yeah.
filter vodka through a Brita filter.
Well, and
cut,
honestly,
cut
I
that
think
part out.
I think we could even leave it in because it ties nicely into the next segment, which
Okay.
is cost cutting measures. What are some cost cutting measures that preserve the customer experience? So when you think about looking at your tools, obviously Martech and technology is always going to be an important piece of any organization. You can't throw everything out, right? You can't just have an organization that runs on nothing. But which tools, which pieces of technology are the most important for driving revenue, right? To retain what really is working. And to your example, if you're filtering vodka through a Brita filter, there
Pop
might
off
be
vodka.
better,
Pop
yeah,
off vodka through a Brita filter.
there might be better ways to do it, but you're preserving the experience. Like you want to drink, and that's one way to do it, right?
The way that I approach what Akande just said is, let's think about the foundation of a house, right? Now, what the foundation of a house is a marketing automation platform and a CRM,
Hmm.
because you need a customer relationship manager and you need a way to talk to individuals, right? Phones, Zooms, webinars, those are all foundational items. We need to be able to connect and talk to people. We need to be able to pick up the phone call or have a digital dialer in the today's day and world, right? That is the foundation. Talking to people, sending them communication, and making sure sales knows what they're doing. All of that can be done with those four things. And actually, now with the consolidation effort that a lot of tech has, realistically, marketing automation, CRM, and something like Zoom, right? Because you can call people on Zoom, you can text people on Zoom, and mind you, like we're not being sponsored by Zoom. Love to, would love to get sponsored by Zoom, but uh, just know, like those are the fundamentals. So when budget cuts happen, start from there. And then let's expand. Let's see what else makes our life easier and what else can we do. And I think if we just have that mentality of saying these are the core things that we need in order to be just operational, now let's expand, it'll make the kind of the shock of, oh my God, we're not going to have platform X, Y, and Z, or oh my God, we're not going to, it'll make it a lot more digestible if we put our mentality back into that mode as well.
Absolutely. It's kind of like doing less with more or doing more with less, I should say, might feel like a challenge, but oftentimes we do less with more, right? A lot of times we'll have so much technology that we get bogged down that we think we need to use, and we end up becoming inefficient while trying to create efficiency. So if we're looking at cost cutting, if we're looking at breaking things down, sometimes it's great to just clear out the noise, right? There's nothing wrong with having less tech available if you're able to hit your goals and drive that growth. And I think that's really kind of the theme of this particular topic is RevOps. With shrinking budget, you can do your job and you can excel in it using these approaches.
That's how you justify marketing budget, right? Because we come from a world where there's so much tech available and everyone has a go-to-market strategy from a software perspective. Everyone knows they're going to sell you on a need. This is why you need it. This is why it'll make your life easier. All of these things are a product selling tactic, but fundamentally, what is it that you need in order to be efficient at your job really is, communication with the client and marketing to the client, right? You can talk about Google ads, we can talk about all of those things, and like I said, once we start expanding that bubble of creativity, there is no end point, there is no bound to it, right? But once again, think about a house. Core foundation of a house, if the foundation is weak, anything that you put up will eventually fail no matter what.
Yeah, that's a great point. You want to make sure that your foundation is solid before you start adding on those additional things. And I think that leads us into our next to last segment, which is what are some innovative approaches doing more with less? And one of the things that I'm always reminded of and always kind of sticks out in my mind is if you go back in time 20 years ago, 30 years ago, before the advent of social media or the at least the accessibility of it that we have now, fast forward today, it always kind of surprises me how people have literally built multi-million dollar businesses using one of these, using a literal device that they can hold in their hand. The landscape is changing. So if there's any example of doing more with less, that's a great example. But the same could be true in RevOps and in organizations
Yeah.
that are larger.
I mean, I remember I used to BCC people on emails as a form of email marketing, even before constant contact was around, right? And I'm not saying bind you, like, please don't do that. Like, please do not,
So many
like,
violations.
BCC. Yeah, right. But what I'm saying is, like, that's the level of craftiness that we get. That you have to put yourself in that state. Is if I didn't have all of these tools that are available, how would I approach this? And once again, that automatically reduces, it doesn't help, but it reduces the sticker shock of not having those platforms or not being able to do it easily, because once again, that's what software does, right? Marketing automation makes sending emails to a broader audience easy. But now, if you think about strategies, especially in 2025, is what are we talking about? We're not talking about casting a wide net anymore, right? That was marketing strategies 6, 7 years ago. Now we're saying, well, we want to target people. We want to create these segments. We want to, micro target people, and a lot of those are, maybe 50 to 1,000 people, which is still a
Mhm.
pretty broad from a term, but it's still all doable without a system, right? I mean, once again, don't BCC people, but it's very easy to email 25 people and, to Connor's point, pick up the phone and call them in a state where you have to prove your worth. Once again, if you're tuning in like midway, I'm not saying these are strategies that you should implement. I'm saying these are strategies of how do we prove value when our budget has already been cut, right? This is post, we're fighting for our budget. Nope, axe is there. Now what do we do? How do we approach this?
Yeah, and one of the things too that we've noticed, I think, as consultants in the space working with technology quite often, when we encounter organizations who can't justify the $100,000 plus spend for adding an additional tech platform, with the tools they have, they get really hyper focused and really innovative. So in the case of like a marketing automation tool, maybe they only sent out emails and used landing pages. Then we start seeing them do personalization, hyper personalization, A B testing, split testing, time send testing, nurture campaigns. We really see them say, okay, I can't get these other tools. Let me just maximize and squeeze every drop out of this lemon for this particular platform.
Even free items, right? Like I think chatbot now is easily accessible. It's easily available with majority of the marketing automation platforms that are there, right?
Yeah.
We've seen people say, "Well, what is really the chatbot kind of doing?" Reevaluating the purpose of it. because there was a chatbot craze. All of that stuff happened. Now they're like, okay, it's another method of, once again, one of the kind of the key pillars of what marketing does and RevOps is supposed to do is communication. So can we provide information? We have people self-serve? Where do we scale on those? And like I said, that's what we want to try to put our. That's what we want to try to think about when we are already told, sorry, this is the
Yeah.
budget. It is what it is. Make it work.
Yeah, like even, and you reminded me, like even data enrichment tools, right? Before it was, okay, data enrichment, here's what this thing is. It's so exciting. Now it's become pretty much ubiquitous. But if your team says, hey, we can't afford it, give me someone's name and their company. I will find their email, the company size. I will be the data enrichment
Yeah. So
myself.
and here's a hot take and probably a more a confrontational take on data enrichment. I think we've in data enrichment, we've gotten to a place that we just enrich data to enrich data, even though it's meaningless to us, right?
Hmm.
If like, what do we realistically need to know about your target audience? Everyone's different, but from our perspective, we just need to know what is the company's tech stack, what is their phone number and a valid email, right? That's
Yeah.
it. Like, do we need to know their local address, their cell phone, their fax, their pager? I don't even know if people have pagers anymore.
Yeah.
Like their blood type, how many children do they have? Like data enrichment and data logging is something that's
Yeah.
gotten to me out of hand very quickly. And those credits, even though it might say, oh, it's 50 cents a credit, it's $1 a credit to enrich a lead and whatever it is, multiply that by 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, right? It adds up
Yeah.
really quick. And what is the purpose of the data? Like what amount of data do you as your team realistically look at? You look at titles, you look at the company, you look at the annual revenue of the company, is a phone number or email. Boom, 5 things.
Yeah.
That's what you need in order to go to market with any product or service that you offer. Everything else, I'm not saying that it's bad. Once again, it's good to have. It starts up conversations. But to Akande's point, a good sales rep can pick up the phone call, generate a conversation right there and then. We can send them an email, and if they engage with the email, we have some sort of talking points. Marketing automation, they visit our web pages, we have some talking point, right? Sometimes it's a lot easier to look at, kind of go back to the basics, especially once again, depending on where you're tuning in. We are in a scenario where you are being asked to cut your budget
Hmm.
and work with what you have and get rid of your tech stack, right? So survival strategy,
Yeah.
essentially.
Absolutely. This is really a scenario where your back is up against the wall. Great RevOps leaders, great RevOps professionals can navigate it because they know how to do these things and because they're willing to put their nose to the grindstone and really make it happen. So as we kind of consider, the closing this out, as we consider the key takeaways and what we want to recap, it sounds like the first thing that we kind of talked about is you have to collaborate and have data drive the decisions that you're making. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for tech and processes as well and strategies, right? The data has to be and new data, not something that worked 9 months ago. New data, relevant data and that's the whole purpose of the alignment, like having data drive those decisions and the data that is relevant.
Yeah, and that transparency is important too, just to highlight that too. If sales isn't letting you know what they really need, marketing's not letting you know what they really need, the RevOps conversation becomes a lot harder and you might cut something that you probably should have fought a lot more for, right? With that, cost-cutting measures should at least enhance or preserve the customer and the selling experience. So you don't want to do something that's going to keep you from doing your job all the way to the extent that you need it to be done.
And once again, the selling experience, like, I'm sorry, sales guys. Like, I understand there's a lot of cool, platforms out there. There's a lot of cool, like, automatic emails, but we're coming into a world where there's so much information and so many of those products that we are now being asked to personalize all of our stuff and go back to one-to-one conversations, because just like something out of your corner of your eye, people will see it and they will move on with it. I think the latest report is you had 1.3 seconds or zero point zero 0.03 seconds to grasp someone's attention, which is,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
which is like 2 seconds. It was 5 seconds last year or something like that. We'll put
yeah,
up the numbers, but it was like 5 seconds. It was 3 seconds. Back when we started, it was like 13 seconds. Now it's like half a second. Like
yeah.
people will look at it, skim it, and move on. So that's why, hey, we got to pick up the call. Let's develop a relationship. Let's get personal. And that's that's what we're talking about. It's like that's why people are being asked to cut tech out of their budgets and out of their stack, is because it is moving back into, they're into that point where hyper personalization and developing a relationship is coming back, is I wouldn't say coming back, but is, yeah, no, yeah, I would say that it
Yeah,
is
yeah,
coming back,
I
right? Yeah,
think so.
it is coming back, because we had the pendulum swing when tech started, and there's mass, let's cast a wide net, let's have lead life cycle, and scoring is going to tell you, and eventually people picked up on it, and then pendulum swung so hard with all of the tech and software there. Now it's swinging right back to like, hey, we just really need to get build trusting relationships with people.
I remember how exciting it was way back then to get an email. You get emails
Yeah.
reaching out. Now, and it was like, oh, I'm getting another mailer. Now it's like, oh, I got a letter in the mail. This is kind of cool. Let me check this out. An email, or even a phone call. We got a phone call today from a client that we're working with, and I was like, oh, that's a pleasant surprise. It's nice to get a phone call once in a while just to talk to somebody.
And now
Um,
it's like you wake up and you look at your email like, oh my God, there's like 300 emails from when I went to bed and came,
yeah,
woke up in the morning. And like I said, the 0.03 seconds, just FYI, behavior is delete, 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 archive, delete. This seems interesting. Delete, delete, delete.
yeah.
I'll go back to it, right?
Yeah. Well, and then just to flag this as well, because we talked about this, but just to hit it home, cost cutting does not mean you impact that foundation. You need a good CRM, you need a good marketing automation tool, you need Zoom or whatever your webinar video conferencing is. You need those things as foundational. And the last key takeaway is think about innovative ways to approach problems and squeezing your technology and your teams to push themselves and the technology to get the most out of it that we can.
And honestly, I think that third bullet point is we talked about it on a couple episodes, like what makes a great revenue operations leader. That third bullet point of the craftiness and being able to look at something not as a burden, but try to find a workout, like a workaround solution. That's the key of revenue operations, right?
Yeah.
Like that is the fundamental basis of, let's just make shit work, and let's see how efficiently we can do it. And if you can do it at that level, any piece of technology is just going to be, an additional topping on the cake, right? Like,
Yeah, like a good RevOps leader will fight for budget, try to secure budget, justify budget. A great RevOps leader will shine when the budget is cut.
100%.
Ultimately. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of Call It RevOps. We hope you had some valuable takeaways. Be sure to share this with another RevOps leader in the space so they can get some more insights. And we look forward to seeing you next time.